Hello, and welcome to the Ros Savage Project. Today, I'm delighted to welcome to the show Paula, who calls us from Santiago in Chile. And today, we're particularly going to be talking about courage in connection with her work. So, Paula, could I first of all welcome you to the show? Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much, Ross, for inviting me today.
It's a real pleasure to have you. So, could I start off by asking you to tell us in a minute or two who you are and what you do?
Well, I'm Paula Escobar Chavarría. I'm a Chilean journalist, author, and editor. And as magazines editor here in Chile, I have launched a campaign against Photoshop and against an unhealthy image of women in media.
Wow, that is an amazingly bold move. Can you tell us a little bit more about what exactly that involves?
Well, in the process of editing our magazines here in Chile, and I think all over the world, you can see that from one point of view, you try to really focus on women that have accomplishments that are important to society and all that. But on the other hand, when you get to fashion and beauty sections, most magazines in the world should hire or might hire underweight models and underage models. And also you can see that the use of Photoshop to alter and to change women's image is spread all over the world. And that is completely related to young girls suffering from eating disorders. So we decided to put an end to this, at least from our side, and we stop using Photoshop. We forbid the use of Photoshop to alter the image of people in our magazines. And also, we decided to stop hiring underaged or underweight models. And we demand a certificate from a doctor that can be sure, that can be certain that that model is healthy.
And just to put this into context, this is a very high profile magazine, isn't it? It's the magazine that goes with
Yeah.
Chile's foremost newspaper.
Yes, yes, is the women's magazines that goes with El Mercurio, which is the main newspaper in Chile and has the most important readership in Chile and also an enormous amount of advertising investment.
So, what was the thing that first inspired you to take this move?
I think that to see that we had within our own team and within our own project this enormous contradiction, and I think that women in media, we have a responsibility that we have to face and that we have to embrace. And in one sense, whether you are trying to change the state of things and trying to change and to improve the state of these problems, or you're doing the same things as everyone else, and you are part of that system that is all the time discriminating women and making them feel that they are not entitled to have the age that they have and to have the body that they have. So I think that was my main motivation, and also everything we learned, Ross, at our great stay at Yale Well Fellows program, when we were encouraged to take a lead. And as you are a great leader and you have done so many things that have inspired so many women and men all over the world, I can say that I felt that in this sense we had to do something concrete and to show that there was a path, and we have proved that. I mean, the magazine is still doing great, and we have only support from our readers and support from the advertising community. So far we haven't had any kind of negative approaches towards our project.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the reaction. Were you nervous as you were considering switching to this new policy? Were you nervous about what the reaction might be?
Yes, I was. But I gave it a lot of thought, in the sense that, well, I was nervous, first of all, that maybe not everyone was on board. That first it was very important to have all the team in the same path. And some people had certain concerns towards what would happen. I mean, should the readership of the magazine fall, or what would happen to advertising, and what would happen in the overall image of the magazine? I remember a talk with one of the designers. She was saying to me, what's going to happen about, the pages? I mean, my work as a designer. She was worried that maybe if women were not photoshopped the way they were, that was done before, or maybe if we could hire the super skinny models, then there would be a loss in the I would say beauty of the magazine. And I think her concern was very sincere, in the sense that when it's the first time that you're doing something, when you're trying something new, of course, having fear and having this kind of overwhelming feeling of what's next is reasonable. And that was the first point. And of course, I was worried about what was going to happen with the public and with the advertisers. But on the other hand, Ross, I have to say that there's an enormous trend now towards acceptation of women's bodies, towards acceptations of women's age. So you have this mainstream trend of, portraying women as beauty, skinny, very young objects. But on the other hand, you have the counter trend. So I knew that we had support.
So how long ago was it that you first introduced this policy?
It was 2 years ago, 2 years and a half
Yeah.
almost.
So
Yes.
were you were amongst the first magazines to really pioneer that new
Yeah, that's what
directive?
I know, because this initiative has been portrayed in a lot of media in Latin America, and also in Europe, and in the US. Last year I was in London with you because BBC decided to give a recognition to this project. So I'm sure that there's very few magazines in the world that have taken this engagement, or this before and after policy.
And how about your colleagues? How did they react when you first tabled this idea, like the photographers and you mentioned the designer? What was their reaction? Were they supportive, or was there some anxiety there?
I think there was both of them, probably. Just what happens when you're making big changes, that people feel on one hand supportive, and they feel this is a good thing to do, because no one wants a world where young girls feel that they have to be deprived of food in order to fit this beauty canon. But on the other hand, they feel the anxiety of this new path. And I think that what I felt was that people were very supportive on the big idea, on the big picture, but very anxious about the day-to-day life, what was going to be new, which models were going to be fit for our pages. For example, I can say, Ross, that now 90% of the models that the model agency models in Chile, that are global brands of model agencies all over the world, 90% do not meet our criteria. So we have a very few models that we can really hire, because the other ones are underweight, underage. They don't have the certificate of health given by a doctor. So that's one thing. And I would say that you were asking about photographers and designers. Before beginning this, I chose 10 great photographers, and I talked to them and I explained them the project, and they were in. So after that, I would say, okay, I have these 10 great photographers, these 10 top Chilean photographers. They are on. So all the other photographers felt, okay, I have to even try to be there. Otherwise, what I'm telling is that I'm not, capable of doing these great pictures without using Photoshop.
That's a very smart move, actually, to
Yeah,
enlist the support of some key
yeah,
people when you're trying to make a fairly dramatic change. So that's a really good takeaway for me, that it's important to show that this is the way that things are going. Um,
yes.
yeah. Do you think you've always had that sort of that you've always brought that sense of purpose and integrity to your journalism, because I don't know about in Chile so much, but certainly here in Britain, journalists maybe aren't the best loved people in the whole country because they can sometimes seem to be quite mean and quite manipulative. But have you always tried to bring a strong ethical sense to your work?
Yes, I think that journalism is a very tough profession, and it's for me, it's more than a work or a profession. It's a vocation. I mean, it's what I'm doing. You know, it's my métier really. So I think that from the beginning, my approach has been to be as honest and fair as possible, and to be as accurate, and to try to do my best effort and my team's best effort to be fair, to be independent, to be truthful. And I think a lot of journalists are in the same path. Of course, all over the world, here in Chile, in the UK, and in the US, all over the world, you have people that don't feel that way about being a journalist, or they don't feel the responsibility, the enormous responsibility that we have towards society. But I think that in every profession you have that kind of, different approaches. Some people see this as a business, or see this as a way of earning a living, or a way of making themselves famous, or whatever. But a lot of us, I think most of us, I want to think that most of us journalists in the world, we feel that we are doing this because it's a very important service to society, and that we have to do our best to remain ethical, independent, and truthful. Of course, we can make mistakes, because every human endeavor is, of course, open to mistakes and to error. But we have to do our best to try to be as honest and fair and responsible as possible.
It's really wonderful and very encouraging to hear that. So, thinking about your very distinguished career as a journalist, what do you think's been the single scariest thing that you've ever had to do, whether it was a particularly challenging assignment or a challenging promotion to a new level in the organisation? What's been the thing that has been the most nerve-wracking for you?
I would say, Ross, that the most freaking thing for me was when I was 27 years old, and I was offered the job of editor in chief of a magazine that was a very important one in Chile. Before that, I was the we can say the national editor, and and I was super young, really, and I also my youngest son Simon was recently born, so I was 27, and I had these three kids, and I was offered this huge promotion that I knew that it was going to be a huge challenge, both in the professional sense and also in the personal sense, because of my family, but also because when you are that young, you don't have the maturity, you don't have the emotional skills, you don't have the experience to lead with your own emotions and your own frustrations and your own, the way you feel and the way. So that was really challenging. So I took this decision talking with my husband Fernando, and he said to me, Paula, if you don't do this, you're going to regret it. I mean, it's better to try and to say, okay, I will try to do this, and if I fail, okay, I will say I was not ready yet, but I tried, than saying no, And I thought also that maybe this is a very feminine approach, but I thought, well, I'm the second on board now. If I say no, there's going to be another editor in chief that's going to find another second on board, because he's not going to, or she's not going to let me be here. So what do I prefer? To try to step in and try to, go on with this challenge, or begin to look for another job. That was really awful, because I had done before my career in that magazine. I knew the product, I knew the magazine, I knew the sections. So I said yes, and it was really scary. It was a very difficult moment for me. I did my best, but it was tough. Even, at the end, I succeeded. The magazine did well. I was for 5 years the editor in chief. And then I was offered this great job at El Mercurio, and I ended my tenure as editor-in-chief at the other magazine very well, with the sales of the magazine up and advertising, and with a great team. But I have to say that it was a courageous decision, and it was tough, but I don't regret it.
I think you make a good point there that people, I think maybe particularly women, we often hold ourselves back because we're afraid to fail. We're not
Yes.
confident enough that we can really do the job. And it's, that you probably know about the classic psychological study that they did where they gave men and women a job description and asked them if they would apply. And the women would look down the 10 or whatever points on the job description and they'd go, oh, well, I've only got 7 or 8 of those, so I don't think I'm ready. While the men would go, oh, well, I've got 3 of those, but hell, I can learn the rest as I go along.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating that we really we don't put ourselves forward. And I suppose one of the points of starting a new job is that we are going to learn and develop as we go along, and we may not be perfect at the start.
Yes.
And to have the courage to be okay with not being perfect. But maybe
Yes.
again, it comes back to the reason that was underlying your policy change on models and Photoshop, which is we think we have to be perfect. We have to be perfect looking.
Yes.
We have to be perfect at our jobs. So
Yeah.
I'm sort of throwing that out there. How do we have the courage to not be perfect?
That's a great question, Ross. And I think, of course, it's in the base of what we are doing here with our policy against Photoshop. I would say that women, we have stepped in work, life, and all that, but we have this idea that we are like a guest. We are invited to this world that belongs to men. So we have to be perfect in order not to be, out of this world. So it's there's something, as you said, like we can be successful in our careers, but we have to be perfect at home. We have to be perfect with our bodies. We have to be perfect in images, and we have to be very careful. And that's impossible. I mean, you can't be courageous, and you can't be bold, and you can't be an explorer, and at the same time be very cautious, and at the same time trying to be perfect. I don't know who put this awful idea in our heads that we have to be perfect, because perfection doesn't exist, first of all, and second, it's something that only applies to women. I can see in this sense, men, they can be fat, they can be bold, they can be whatever, and they feel great with themselves. There's no society signal saying to them, you have to be skinny, you have to be young, you have to be whatever. I mean, they can be whatever they want. They have the freedom to do that. And in the same way, they have freedom to be the leaders they want to be, for example. If we compare the situation of men and women, there are certain things that people expect from women in leadership positions, that they have to be warm, they have to be like a mother, etc. But men can be, you have different kind of leadership types, different kind of ways of approaching power. But we have to follow one path, and I think that's something that we have to change for the next generation. I think every generation of women has done their jobs in order to put another flag in this man's world. And I think the next thing is to have more freedom to be ourselves, to have the age we have, the body we have, the kind of life we have, and of course to embrace our mistakes and our errors as a part of our lives, and not to be ashamed of that.
It's so interesting, isn't it? I love that phrase that you use, like we act as if we've been invited into this man's world, and so we have to be the polite guest. And it I'm fascinated by how we change the culture, and maybe it does start by women changing themselves and showing up in a different way and not being afraid to be authentically themselves rather than trying to fit into a certain stereotype or behaving like the polite guest and being afraid to upset anybody or make mistakes. But it feels like it's been a very long process already trying to change the culture. Since the women's movement of the 60s and 70s, we still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
So what's my question in this? I suppose my question is, what advice would you give to the women listening to this podcast about how they as individuals can start to change this culture, how we can change the paradigm?
I think, Ross, that first of all, we women all over the world and all over ages and generations, we should have more solidarity between us.
Mm.
Sometimes, you feel this sense of competition between women. You don't sometimes the worst critics and the most painful ones come from women to other women in power, whether they are the president and they say awful things about them, whether they are on TV and they begin to say this, body shaming things about them, or whether they are the other, colleagues in the office, or whether it's another woman. So I think one thing that we can begin changing now is to begin to have more solidarity between us, and to be more advocate for other women. So if, for example, someone would say, some men or some women would say, oh, that woman, that she's like a man, or she's like, I don't like her style, or she's fat, or whatever, or her personal life, or whatever, I would say, stop that. This person has an enormous courage. This person has enormous accomplishments, and she's not perfect as anyone is. So that's one thing that might be very powerful if we all put another chip on our brains to be more, more polite with each other, and to feel that we are in the same boat. We're in the same fight. It's not a fight against men. It's a fight against these stereotypes, against this society that has, put so many restrictions and discrimination for women all over the ages. And we are, we have so many things more to do. So that's one thing that I would encourage young and all women from all over ages, but especially young women, to begin their lives as being, being the advocates for the other ones, not to be the competition.
Yeah. I love that. That's beautiful. Yes, I was reading a very depressing article the other day about how many women really struggle with their female bosses and feel
Yes.
that they're being more competed with rather than mentored and supported and encouraged.
Yeah.
So yeah, if we could change that and actually, work together as sisters, that'd be fantastic. I really like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying. I've met Paulita, who I think is your youngest daughter. Do you have an older daughter as well?
Yeah, I have Francisca.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
26. Yeah.
So, what advice have you given to your daughters about how to be strong young women, if you have?
Yes, yes. Francisca is an engineer and she works in San Francisco now. And Paulita, she's starting to be an actress, but she's already in a TV series here in Chile. So I can say that they are both working girls now. And my advice to them first is to follow their vocation. I mean, as you know, when we were at Yale, Paulita had huge doubts about being a lawyer, whether being a lawyer or an actress. And of course, the two professions have completely different, outcomes in the monetary sense and all that. And I said to Paulita, you have to do whatever you like. I mean, it's your whole life. I mean, it's like 80 years doing the same thing. You have to love what you do. And I think when you love what you do, you're going to be good at that. You're going to be great. You're going to be someone that gives their life to make that profession better. So that's the first thing. I mean, to really connect with their more deep vocation and what they like to do and what they feel, what not, thinking about what society, what wants from them, etc. And now that they are working, I would say that all the time I'm talking to them first to go step by step. I mean, not to be super ambitious in the sense of trying to get one promotion after another, but to to make a very, a very thought path. I mean, to be every step, to enjoy every step, and not to be obsessed about being, the first one in every ranking, but to love what they do and to be very serious and committed and responsible. And that way, you're going to make your way up. But it has to be a way that has, certain that you take some time, and of course, I'm all the time encouraging them, Ross, to try to make the difference. I mean, for example, Francisca, she's in engineering, but she's working with B Corps, which are now, companies that are committed to certain values that are very important, that I hope all companies all over the world should be, committed to these values like sustainability and equal pay for men and women, and every kind of, and for trade, etc. And I think that's when we were talking before about journalism and ethics and all that. I mean, you try to. I think you have to try to relate yourself with the best version of your profession and try to remain truthful to that, even though the path, of course, is not like it's not that you decide and then everything will be fine. You are going to make mistakes, you're going to fall, but you have to know where you're going. And I think that's and to enjoy. I would say that in my own career, as I was promoted very young and I had all these responsibilities, I didn't have all the time the wisdom to enjoy, I'm enjoying now, but I'm older, it's been 20 years after that big promotion. So now I take time to enjoy and to say, okay, this is the magazine that I'm editing this week, and I really love this article, and I love to write this op-ed, and I'm really enjoying doing this. And not only to think about the outcomes or the results or how the rest of the world is going to see your work, and also to have time to enjoy yourself.
That sounds like a really great recipe for life, to be true to yourself, to try to be useful to the world, and to have a good time while you're doing it.
Yeah.
We're getting close to time now. I just wonder, is there anything else that you'd like to say to our listeners on the subject of courage, and particularly for women?
Well, I think we have covered all the topics for us, and also talking to you, such a courageous woman, about courage I feel like you have all the everything to say. I don't feel particularly courageous. I think that what I've done is somebody had to do it, and I was the person that was there. Someone has to stop this culture where women are all the time undermined in media, and portrayed, whether as this skinny, super young, or this witches, or this somebody has to step in. And I think women in media, we have a responsibility. We have something to do. We have the power to change that. And so I don't feel particularly courageous. I feel that I had to do this. It was my duty in one sense. And a few hours later, I'm going to be at a school here in Santiago. What we are doing now is to talk about young women at schools, to give them lectures about eating disorders related to how women are portrayed in media, and to explain to them that these supermodels that they see, they don't really exist. I mean, and if they exist, they are, undernourished people by every medical standard. So that's something that I want to encourage people to follow their path, and to see in everyday life what they can do to make things better. Of course, you can do great and things with enormous impact, but you can begin to do what's just in front of you, and change that a little bit, and that makes an enormous impact on the long term. I can say that this project has had an enormous impact, and I thought it was like a small thing to do, and I think it was an obvious thing to do, especially after reading about countries that have passed laws for this issue, like France and Israel and other countries. So, but this tiny thing that I thought was a small thing to do made an enormous difference, and I'm talking to you about this. So I would encourage women to try to think what's in their everyday life that can be different and can be can be done in the sense of making life for women all over the world better, even if it's a tiny step or looks
That
like one.
that's wonderful. And it is interesting that one of the themes that seems to be emerging from these conversations is that um, the guests that I'm speaking with, I don't think any of us really feel courageous in ourselves. Other people might think we're courageous, but for all of us, it seems to be the obvious thing for us to do. It's almost the thing that we
Yeah.
can't not do. But I love that advice about if we all just think about what's the one thing that we can do to change our corner of the world, we can and in fact must all make an impact. So
Yes.
thank you for that, Paula. You've been a wonderful guest, lots of real pearls of wisdom in there. And it's been wonderful to have the chance to catch up with you 4 years after we left Yale. So thank you.
Thank you, Ross. It was an honor to be part of this project, and it's also a delight to talk to such an inspirational woman like you.
Thank you.